A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Natural Medicine. I have a graduate engineer in biomedicine here again today. You probably already know her. I always say it's Miss Blueberry. Welcome, dear Jutta Suffner. Nice that you travelled from the far north to the south again.
Hello, Alexander. Thank you very much again for the invitation.
My pleasure, dear Jutta. I'd like to tackle a topic today that I have never discussed in an episode. We keep hearing about the blood-brain barrier, but actually never talked in detail about what exactly it is. What is its job? Why is the task becoming more and more difficult for it to cope with? Can you give me a little bit more information about that?
Perhaps it is first important to define what is it anyway, the blood-brain barrier, and it's nothing more than the separation of the normal blood system to the central nervous system, like a filter function, so to speak. So when certain toxins get into our bloodstream, if you have pneumonia, then we are actually protected from it, that the whole thing does not get out of hand and goes into the central nervous system. So it is a natural protective barrier. First of all, that is the most important thing, and it actually has the task to let good things through and to protect ourselves from the bad things. That's just so that you know the basics. And nowadays, it's like that. We have a certain connection between the gut and the brain. And now people are wondering, what does the bowel have to do with the blood-brain barrier? It is now the case that the base is laid in our intestines, that communication with our brain takes place there. And of course, I dealt a bit with this topic and looked for books from the end of 1800 to early 1900. And I found it very interesting that, for example, the doctor who discovered Parkinson's, so Dr. Parkinson, that was in 1847, I think, or in 1817, he already examined things in the brain and already established, for example, that the frequency of Parkinson's increases with a decreased frequency of stool. He knew it already. Or if, for example, you look at Dr. Maximilian Bircher, he already said in 1936, be careful what you ingest, as anything else could have a negative impact on your brain. So these things have been around for a long, long time. And now you start digging it all up again bit by bit.
Good. Then I keep hearing the word a holy blood-brain barrier, and I keep hearing that electric smog apparently damages our blood-brain barrier, which would mean that all of the garbage would end up in my brain. Is that true, or are they just rumours?
Well, many know leaky gut, so this holy bowel. And lately there has been more talk of leaky brain. That's what is meant by that. But you certainly can't separate it, because only if my intestine is without holes, it works up there too. As strange as it now sounds, but I'm ingesting something. I eat carbohydrates, proteins and fats. I eat them, they are metabolized, so then they are processed accordingly. Then messenger substances are formed, and these messenger substances then go up into our brain, like what most people know, tryptophan. When you can't sleep, I often see it on my Delta scans too. Somehow tryptophan is missing. How does that get up there now? That can only happen if I ingest it accordingly. Then serotonin is formed from the tryptophan, then melatonin from the serotonin. So I first have to have enough basic substances in the bowel so that serotonin and melatonin can be formed from tryptophan. So my highway from the gut to the brain has to be level first. Otherwise, my brain is closed off from the outside world. And then this whole physiological function of the blood-brain barrier doesn't work at all. But what you just mentioned is unfortunately true, and there are also enough tests for that. Be it you take your cell phone to your ear. Unfortunately, most people call with a cell phone close to the ear, simply through all this radiation from the electric smog on top. thousands of nerve cells are killed. And of course, that has a corresponding effect on your entire neural network. That means your brain activity decreases. And the worst thing is when this blood-brain barrier does not work as it should, because people do not eat properly. For example, then of course you can imagine that such repair processes can't happen the way they are actually intended by nature. And that's why it's a huge topic. And this word, as I said, leaky brain, has been on everyone's lips for a few months now. Unfortunately, you have to say.
But I heard that also the leaky gut is actually a widespread disease, that many people have this problem nowadays. And does that mean if the people who really have a bowel problem now actually also have this leaky brain?
Well, I think it would be certainly wrong to say that one thing definitely causes the other, but the probability increases. If you think about it, here in our Western world, every 500th citizen has, for example, ulcerative colitis, a chronic inflammatory bowel disease. That should make you a little thoughtful. Every 500th, which is a huge amount. And these inflammatory bowel diseases, what are they? They're ultimately an inflammation of the top layers of mucus. And when you ingest something, of course, toxins seep in too. I always say it's like bricks from a house. Usually the bricks are supposed to protect your house from rain, wind, whatever is coming. This is how you can also imagine this intestinal mucosa. But if the brick layer has not worked properly and these stones are not properly on top of each other, then it can rain inside and everything go right into the house. And this is the same with the intestine. And the worst thing is, if this whole intestinal barrier becomes inflamed, then of course this inflammation can go anywhere from the intestine, for example, to the brain too. And there is a wonderful book, I just thought of it, which is called The Inflamed Soul. An American neurologist wrote it. And they did a study in London with 9-year-old children. And they measured in these 9-year-old children how many and what inflammation parameters these children have in their bodies, and measured the same children again when they were 18. And the result was that the children who had these increased inflammatory factors by the age of 9, at the age of 18 they had an increased risk of depression, dementia, you don't want to believe it, to fall ill with these diseases. And then the connection should already be clear to you.
May I sum it up again in lay language? I have a leaky gut, so now certain substances which are not supposed to actually get into the bloodstream, the blood then goes to the blood-brain barrier, and the blood-brain barrier, when it's intact, keeps it from entering. And when it's no longer intact, it just goes through and I get it all in my brain.
And that's exactly why it's so bad. Then the substances come and get somewhere where they shouldn't go. And that is often underestimated. And that's why, for example, you try to find out what substances can I give people to heal the whole thing again or to bring it back to order. And there is also the problem. Most of the substances you use, food supplements, the molecules are too big, they don't go through. But you would like them to go through so that the communication between bowel and brain works again. And then the search begins, what I can give people so that I can get this whole system back in order.
Again, I think I remember Dr. Klinghardt or Dr. Mutter once said that most of the Alzheimer's and dementia problems that we know today are actually caused by heavy metal pollution or intestinal problems.
It is like that. It starts with the intestines. If the bowel is leaky, then, for example, these fatty acids that you need, in the brain you need glial cells. These are phagocytes, so to speak. Well, they are only formed if I have my substances down here, in the bowel accordingly, when the bowel is intact. And the food I eat can also be converted properly. For example, butyrates, butyric acid, fatty acids, that these glial cells are formed in the brain. And these glial cells are my fire brigade up here, my defence substances. And if, of course, I don't have any, then, of course, all the toxins can reach all regions of the brain. I mean, we all know about the pineal gland. That's a huge topic. And for most people it is, I'll just say it, littered. And our pineal gland is the gateway to consciousness. But you can imagine, if it's really full of toxins, the doors are definitely closed. How should a connection to higher levels be created? Or, for example, in the hippocampus is the seahorse, and it is the start for all dementia and Alzheimer's diseases. So in what starts with this early learning? And there, increased, I'll just say, to toxin levels have been determined in general, especially with patients who fell ill with dementia, Alzheimer's disease. Just one more thing, dementia is the umbrella term. It means forgotten mind. And then there's this Alzheimer's dementia. That's what we all know. But there's also vascular dementia, just so you know. They are different. We're always talking about Alzheimer's dementia now, what most people know.
Well, we should actually also talk about the pineal gland.
That, I think, is a show of its own. It really is.
Yes, we should still talk about it.
It's definitely worth a show of its own.
Now, something else from my understanding. I've read that, especially for fatty acids, a C8, so a carbon atom with 8 atoms, gets through the blood-brain barrier, while a C12 or a C18 from many oils does not get through the blood-brain barrier. That's why the MCT, the medium-chain triglyceride oil, is so valuable. Well, now it's said that the blood-brain barrier only lets the smallest through, but if any heavy metals get through now, then you have to say, then there is no blood-brain barrier at all, right?
That's why this issue of detoxification is so important. First bowel rehabilitation and then detoxification. And many people say, how long should I detoxify? Actually for life, because we're exposed to all this environmental pollution all day long. So we don't lock ourselves in and say, we detox for a week, now everything is fine, now our brain's free again. But because we are constantly exposed to this stress, and thus also the risk that toxins, let's say, attack our brain, it is just very important to really turn that into a prevention, especially in this day and age. Because as you have already said, there are also studies that are not official now, but there are very, very good results. For example, even with the onset of dementia, if you give people 3 or 4 tablespoonfuls of this MCT, a good coconut oil, for example, every day after 3 or 4 weeks, people can draw a clock correctly again. There are certain tests that you can do. If someone can draw a clock, can they see the numbers correctly, read the numbers correctly, and you can see very clearly that these cognitive things can simply be improved again. Or with certain berries, of course. There are some things that you can really use to re-optimize all of this immune capacity in your brain.
I think that was also in connection with switching to a ketogenic diet with MCT. There have been huge successes.
I always say that to patients too. I say you can only win. Please do it. Get a good MCT oil and give it to your father or mother. Of course, in connection with other things. But the successes are really there and should be done at the onset of signs.
How do you detoxify throughout your life? What do you do?
Well, of course, they don't call me the Baltic blueberry for nothing, and I've just been looking for something special for a long time that I knew crossed the blood-brain barrier, so supports me to keep my brain clear too. And then, of course, I came across the blueberry. Among other things, for me, and for many patients, it is simply part of it.
I didn't know it can detoxify.
Yes.
Because it normally, for detoxification, it's chlorella, spirulina, zeolite, any pectins that simply have this binding capacity. And some work well for the bowel, the other is good for the blood. And it's very difficult for the brain.
Yes, but there are some positive aspects. On the one hand, there are ingredients, so the tannins, for example, in the wild-growing blueberry, which has the ability to bind toxins in the bowel. There are also studies about it. And then the day before yesterday, I recently read an interesting study by Professor Warneke, and it was very enlightening for me. How many patients were there? many, 40,000, 50,000, quite a lot, that they gave them wild blueberries. So one group with none, then some with freeze-dried, and then with an extract. And then they measured the concentration in the hippocampus. And then I thought, what are they doing in the hippocampus? Until, of course, it occurred to me, hang on, if the concentration of these so-called anthocyanins, the ingredients of the blueberry, is high in the hippocampus, I have a corresponding resistance. In other words, I can at least keep dementia and Alzheimer's at bay. I only read that a few days ago by chance.
Hippocampus, where is it?
The hippocampus, that's the seahorse. And in the seahorse, the first signs will appear there, so to speak. Because you can tell when someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, then it's like, where is my key? They can no longer find the keys. So everything that happened recently, they can remember things from a long time ago, but the hippocampus is our first reservoir for our first brief information, and then it is passed on to the long-term memory.
So this wild blueberry is a means of detoxification and also to cleanse the bowel. When the bowel is in order, the leaky gut is prevented. Then also the blood-brain barrier is actually closed again, to go back to our initial topic.
Exactly. It's not the only thing, of course. It's like a big puzzle picture. There are other things. Of course, a good vitamin D or magnesium. You can't utilise vitamin D or magnesium. If someone has problems with the mucous membranes, of course, it includes vitamin A and zinc. They always ask you to pay attention to the chronobiology, so not everything at once. Many say, I'll take everything together in the morning, then I'm done. But I say, no, please stick to the times when you take something. For example, zinc is ideal in the evening at 6, just as an example. Or whatever zinc you use, is it an orotate or a citrate? So there are a few more things to consider. But the blueberry is a standard for me that is simply part of it, because it simply helps on certain levels. Part of it, to restore order in the body. And that's why it's always my secret remedy. What I just take and with which I had very good experiences with patients of all ages.
I recently had a therapist who compared these wild blueberries with the wholesale blueberries, which I consume every day, and found out that there is nothing in it, those that is actually in the wild blueberries. So that's really, I said I was making a big mistake, but I just like to eat my bowl of blueberries in the evening.
Well, me too. At the Baltic Sea, we have a great blueberry field, and I pick them too because it's a simply nice experience to pick them. But when you see them, they are... Our cultivated blueberries are grown to be big. They should be as large as possible, but there is only water in it. And if I cut it open, nothing turns blue or anything. And the ones which I actually like to use, also used therapeutically, they have to be very, they are small. And they have their millions of years of information that they have just picked up from the environment, concentrated in them. And if you cut it open or crumble it with your hands, then everything is blue and black. So that's why it's very, very important not to look for big and water, but rather, sometimes the small is definitely more nourishing.
We have already done episodes about these wild blueberries, and I'm just amazed at how much feedback I've got.
All about the extract now.
People send us amazing stories about these blueberries too. But also, and I marked that on purpose, also with regard to the bowel, which is today's topic, but also much, much more also about children and about adaptogens. So Charlotte writes, better stool, mood, physical fitness. Edeltraud writes, my sore throat improved quickly. Psoriasis is gone too, I noticed. It all comes from the immune system. If the bowel's fine, an incredible number of discomfort disappears. Taken after coughing started, experienced rapid improvement. Various nerve pains disappeared after taking it. Someone else writes, improved skin texture, fewer infections. Miss Maria SP writes, my joint pain has improved significantly. So again, everything comes from the bowel.
That's it. Our gut is our immune system. I mean, if you think about it, that's 400 square metres. If you have our intestines, they are all these little villi folded in, and if you spread it out, that would be 400 square metres. And in these 400 square metres, we have a total of, if you squeeze that together, that's 2 kilograms of microbiome, so subtenants. And these subtenants, it is just a matter of breeding the good subtenants. And to tell the bad ones, I'll end your contract, because we don't need you. And when we eat bad food, have bad habits, let's say, then it's like a dung heap. On a dung heap, you may still remember from your father, he took a dung heap and this dung, it fermented nicely, everything grew on it, and then it came into the potato field. And that's how you can imagine it. If I eat something bad, if I live badly then, I have the purest fermentation factory here. And how should this food be processed then? Because it goes from the small intestine via the entire enterohepatic cycle back to the liver, which should then detoxify. And then the liver says, well, that's all too much now. And all the excess goes back into the small intestine via the bile. Then the small intestine calls, not again, I've detoxified it before. And that's like a game, so to speak. That goes on. And a lot of people also say, I'm so tired. Weird, I can't explain it to myself. It's easy. The liver has no pain receptors. Just like our brain, it doesn't hurt. And then when we're tired, that's just a sign to take a look. Dear liver, am I dealing with you properly? Or maybe I should change my lifestyle or eating habits. Very, very important aspect. Or people, I just remembered, I had one on the phone the other day. Hemorrhoids is a topic that nobody talks about. Hemorrhoids are related to the liver because all of our portal veins connect at the end of the intestine with the normal venous system. If there is too much pressure here, there is too much pressure down there. This is often not seen, and then one only ever works at one point. So you see, liver, bowel, brain, it is all connected.
So a liver detoxification would also be a great thing.
Absolutely.
I find it fascinating that people, when they are healthy and in balance, and when the balance is very slightly shifted out of balance, out of the centre, that sometimes only very little countermeasures are needed so that it regulates itself again immediately.
Yes, and that's why I love this blueberry, because that's a level that we sometimes cannot grasp. Just like many mushrooms or like ginseng or licorice. So all of these substances, who just look when Alexander takes them on and they look, okay, let's say your left earlobe just needs more, or rather the right arm, and of course there are also things that we may not be able to imagine with our mind, but then they are already looking for the place that applies to you right now, where to restore order. And you don't always have to be able to explain everything.
In the middle of this show, you also listed what else you could take. Vitamin C, vitamin D. These are things that you can easily list. But for us consumers, it will be a bit difficult again. Is the way through the therapist recommended from your point of view to supplement what I really need?
Well, yes. That's why these consultations are so important to me. I say, let's talk at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What do you take? Because when I get the emails, sometimes it's 2 pages, it's just too much. Our intestines or even our body will say, hello, how am I supposed to process that? And that's why this personal conversation is so important to me. Let's find out briefly what medication you take is also important, because regardless of whether it is beta blockers or Antazida or other things, they are vital substance blockers. You have to react differently if someone has a heart problem. Then you take even more Q10.
Exactly. Without a therapist, you shouldn't just swallow everything.
Exactly. For prevention, of course, you can't go wrong with the blueberry. We do it too. That's my thing too. Take certain things preventatively. But otherwise, you pick up the phone, let's have a consultation for 10, 15 minutes, talk about it in peace, and then just see, okay, what do you really need? And let's just start with a few things, and then you can always add one or the other to it. Then you can leave out another. So that's like a puzzle, but just don't go wild and say, I'll buy the whole shelf now. It's often actually just bad for the wallet.
You said that on your last show. Just give me a call and then we can talk about it. Can you even save yourself from all the calls?
Well, I manage it well, and of course it's fun, it's great. And I also tell people just to write to me to info@jutasufner.com, and then we'll make an appointment. And no matter if it's a content consultation or a Delta scan. You can explain it briefly by email, but that works very well. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen overnight, so I'd ask for a bit of patience. It takes some time sometimes. But most people have the time, and when I notice that it is really urgent, then it's always somehow made possible, so it works.
Great.
It works.
Dear Jutta, I wish you all the best for the future from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for telling us a little bit about the blood-brain barrier today and making us wiser by explaining. To you, dear viewers, we just wanted to explain what is behind a word that is used very often these days. So, very often it is the bowel, the leaky gut, an unhealthy intestinal environment. And we're all well advised to pay much more attention to the bowel, because this is the origin for up here, or the effect up here, which we all really want to cultivate and cherish, and not slip into Alzheimer's or dementia somehow, which would not be nice for anyone. So, dear Jutta, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And all the best to you. See you next time.